They didn't identify themselves. They didn't even ask me who I was at that point. They did several days later, but up until that time, as far as I was concerned, this was a kidnap for ransom.
Moazzam Begg was 33 years old when he was arrested in Pakistan in early 2002. A father of four, he had recently moved to Afghanistan in the hope of building a school there and living in an Islamic state. But after the US-led invasion of the country in October 2001, he and his family were evacuated to Islamabad to wait out the hostilities. Little did they know that Begg was shortly to spend the next year at Kabul's notorious Bagram airbase, where torture is said to be rife and where detainees have been killed.
Supposed to be interrogated. He was held at the front of my cell in an area that they call the airlock, where one person can be held for any given amount of time when they're first brought in, and he was made to stand with his hands above his head. His hands were chained to the top of the ceiling of the cell, and a hood was placed over it. He started protesting, saying things in Pashto, but I didn't understand, but it was obvious that he was in distress. They came along, the guards did, to take him, but by that time he'd slumped. His body had gone slump. Something had obviously happened to him. And rather than them administering medical treatment, which was what he needed, they started beating and punching and kicking him. And eventually they dragged his body off. To when I was held, interrogated in a solitary confinement room for a month by CIA and FBI and military intelligence, sometimes with a gun to my head. In the next room, during that period, there was a woman constantly screaming, and I could hear the words being shouted to her, get on the ground, spread your legs, screaming words to her, you bitch, and so forth. And at the same time, the woman screaming in a language that I wasn't sure that she was saying any particular words. She was just screaming and crying. They made me believe that that was my wife next door.
In February 2003, Moazzam Begg was transferred to Guantanamo Bay. He was one of 9 British nationals to be held there, without charge, without trial, without access to lawyers or his family. For the first year of his detention there, Begg says he saw no sunlight.
People, before they go to Guantanamo, they have to go through these ghost detention sites where they're held, whether it's at Bagram or elsewhere, and in these places the torture is very physical. People are physically beaten, physically stripped naked, dogs are barking around at them, they're spat upon, they're cursed, and so forth. In Guantanamo the process is different. One of the arguments is because it's not in a sort of a proximity to a war zone, so they don't have to be as harsh. The reality is that initially they were, during the time of Camp X-Ray, very harsh with the detainees. As time went on, as people protested, and as now we've found that people have indeed died in Guantanamo Bay and been sent home in their coffins, things have changed. They've become more strict in a sense, but also they've been very conscious or sensitive not to be very physically harmful towards the detainees. That doesn't mean that people haven't been physically tortured. It just means that they are now exercising more psychological and mental torture on the detainees. And I'll give you an example. Once that I had literally had an anxiety attack because I'd been in the cell without natural light for several months in solitary confinement, and I punched and kicked the walls and so forth and swore and screamed. Instead of giving me access or the ability to talk to other detainees, they brought in a psychiatrist. But the psychiatrist actually suggested a method of suicide to me. She said, have you ever thought about taking your trousers off and threading them with your sheet, and then putting the trousers around your neck to make a noose, and then tying it to the corner of your cell so that you could jump off and kill yourself?
Begg was interrogated on a regular basis. In a letter he sent to his lawyer during his incarceration, he said he was forced to sign documents. In the letter he wrote, I am a law-abiding citizen of the UK and attest vehemently to my innocence before God and the law of any crime, though none has even been alleged. In November 2004, Begg was asked to defend himself against allegations that he was a member of Al-Qaeda and other affiliated terrorist groups, and that he engaged in hostile acts against the United States or its coalition partners. But he insists he had no connection to Al-Qaeda and had never taken up arms. He has previously admitted to financially supporting Muslim fighters in Bosnia and Chechnya, but it was his travels to Bosnia and Afghanistan that were to form the basis of America's suspicions. The US alleged he had attended training camps in Afghanistan, where he learned how to use weapons. They said he sheltered the families of Al-Qaeda fighters and that he supported Osama bin Laden's network. In January 2005, Moazzam Begg was released along with 4 other British nationals. Upon arriving to Britain, they were arrested and questioned at the high-security Paddington Green police station. The next day, Moazzam Begg was a free man.
And I was taken on a RAF transport plane with 3 other British detainees back to the United Kingdom. It was the first time after the transfer of custody from US military to British police that I wasn't shackled, I wasn't handcuffed, I wasn't shouted at or screamed at or dragged or anything like that. And it was a very civil affair. They'd arranged all sort of cultural things. They'd arranged a prayer mat and culturally prepared food and newspapers and chocolates and all sorts of things. So it was a vast contrast to Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
On its 5th anniversary, Moazzam Begg is still very much part of Guantanamo Bay. Today he joined thousands of others across the world to demand an end to the prison camp.
The reality is Guantanamo Bay existed as a naval base prior to this, so you can't call for the closure of a naval base or a town, which is what it's become. What you can do is call for the return and the release of the people that are held there without charge and trial. So that is our hope, that is our call, that is our prayer. In reality, the United States government under Bush has built 2 maximum security, state-of-the-art prisons at the cost of tens of millions of dollars with the intention of holding people there. So all of this now is a new justification for the existence and continuance of Guantanamo Bay. The reality, of course, is that the overwhelming majority of the people that are held there have not been charged with a crime, will never be charged with a crime because there's no evidence against them. Most of them are no longer being interrogated, so whatever intelligence they claim they were getting off from them doesn't exist anymore because it's stale. And so they just languish in these prisons because America wants to tell the world we are saving them from terrorists. But in fact what they're doing is building more anti-American feeling as long as this proceeds and continues.